Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our public accountability meeting, which is one of our sort of more formal meetings around the performance of the police and the fire and rescue services. Today, we've got regular performance updates from both services, but we've got a deep dive on water safety from the fire and rescue service, and then an update on the additional resources that we've brought into the police service as a consequence of the Precept uplift last year, as well as the performance deck. I don't think we've got any questions from the public at the moment, so I think if it's all right, I'd like to go straight into the water safety presentation from the fire and rescue service. And Andy and Mark, I understand that you are going to be presenting that. Is that right?
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. Could you just please also just introduce yourselves when you just start your presentation? Just to explain to people who you are and what your role is, please. That'd be great.
Certainly.
No problem.
Okay. So if you want to start off on the water safety, that'd be great.
Okay, I'll start sharing my screen.
Fantastic, thank you.
And just while Mark does that, I'll introduce myself. I'm Andy Blades, and I'm the Group Manager for York and Selby District within North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service.
Thanks, Andy.
And if you can see that screen, hopefully you can, it should say Public Accountability Meeting.
We do, it's working perfectly, well done.
Fantastic. And my name is Group Manager Mark Naylor, and I am Head of Response and Resilience. So today we're going to talk about water safety.
Sorry, just one quick thing. We've got a lot of material to cover today, so I really need you just to pick out the key points and to speak to the slides rather than read the slides, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Please just move me on if needs be.
Yeah, you've got an hour for this presentation and your performance presentation.
Okay, thank you.
You've also got questions, obviously, so you need to just think about that.
Okay. So I'll flick through there. So currently, what we have in North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Services are response capabilities. So under the Fire and Rescue Services Act, it isn't a statutory duty, but what we do is we match our risk and resource accordingly. And as people know, we have all our stations trained to the minimum level to ensure that we can self-rescue, rescue each other, and also, and importantly, rescue casualties. So we've got 5 stations that are trained above and beyond the minimum. They are geographically placed, aligned to the risk within the county. And you can see those up there. That's Richmond, Ripon, Whitby, Malton and Selby. Importantly on that list, Selby is part of a national asset. So we have a capability within North Yorkshire that allows us to assist other fire and rescue services, both regionally and nationally, if we need to assist in that process. So that is part funded by National Resilience. We've had grants from DEFRA to assist with equipping and training our crews to that level. And as I said, they are above and beyond the minimum level, and they will be what's known as Mod 3 technicians. Additionally to that, we have York, which is a capability within the York city that works between the stretches of Linton and Naburn Lock and the River Ouse and Foss. So they have ability to launch from the water, launch from the bank side using other vehicles and access the water from there. So that is our capabilities currently within North Yorkshire. But every member of staff operationally are trained to the minimum level, which is to self-rescue and rescue each other, and then casualty. Slide.
Tom, yeah, go on. You're on mute, Tom. Go on.
Is that working now?
Yeah.
Is the Mod 2 training there? Is that the national standard for all firefighters?
Mod 2, yes. Essentially, Tom, yes, it is. That is the minimum standard. Although within the concept of operations, they would be known as Class Type D teams. So that's don't enter the water. It gets quite confusing. Right. And as we move through the presentation, I will build upon what our Mod 2 teams do currently and what they are going to be able to do hopefully in the future.
So I think it's going to be really important just to avoid jargon here, because there's a lot of jargon. So if you can just put it in layman's language, that would be really helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to get that straight then, what you said is Mod 2, every single firefighter in North Yorkshire is trained to Mod 2, and that's the basic minimum. And then all the rest that you've got on this slide is above and beyond.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mark, I'll pick up from here with slide 3, yes?
Yes, please.
So you should be able to see now what we've done here is just reflect that annual report figures to give everybody and members of the public that understanding of where the profile of water-related incidents come for North Yorkshire over the last 3 annual periods. And as you can see, number 6 is our highest in terms of water, where we are flooding, but that is inside premises. So, of course, that doesn't have any requirement for our water rescue capabilities in terms of response. So, give an example, that is where people have leaking pipes and it might be affecting another property. So there's a risk to property, and normally where that would need to involve maybe an electric supply before the fire and rescue service would get involved, instead of the normal domestic sort of plumbing arrangements. And then outside of that, we don't have water-related incidents that come into the top 10 in the last 3 years. So for the profile of North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service, it's relatively low demand, the water-related incidents. Having said that, I think it's really important to make clear to people that where we do have water incidents, they involve people entering the water deliberately sometimes, so whether that's been through mental health or whether it's been the effects of alcohol or other substances that means they choose to enter the water, or whether it is for leisure activities. On hot summer days, we'll see people go into lakes or waterfall areas or small becks and rivers that are appealing for a paddle, which are unknown then in terms of hazards for the depth of the water and certainly the temperature of the water. And that's very much inland sort of waterways. But of course, as a county, we have the coast, the East Coast, which also presents issues. Whilst that is supported by the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency and the Royal National Lifeboat Institute, the Fire and Rescue Service will also respond occasionally or on request to incidents along the coastline, which may involve water, but more often than not may be rescue from the actual perimeter, such as rock falls from cliffs is an example of incidents that we've had in the not too distant past. So when they do occur for the service, they can often be high risk in terms of life risk, people in water and either in need of rescue and they are compliant, i.e. they want to be rescued, or on occasion, again, they may not be compliant and want to cause harm to themselves, in which case the rescue becomes sometimes more complex and involved. And of course, notwithstanding that, we will on occasion have people who have got into the water either deliberately or accidentally, and then it's a loss of life, and the Fire and Rescue Service will be part of the recovery of people from water in those circumstances.
Can I ask, in those sort of circumstances, how do you work with the underwater search teams from the police?
Well, normally it would be a police-led operation, so we will provide the resources that are requested. So ordinarily it can be protecting the scene. It might be a public area that we want to then give support with the equipment we have so that it's out of public view. We will remove bodies from the surface ordinarily, but anything below the surface, then the fire and rescue service wouldn't have that capability, and that's where we would transfer to the police to make that recovery of a person from the water.
Thank you.
So in terms of prevention, Mark, perhaps you could just click through a couple of those. Mark's driving the presentation for us. So as I spoke about, prevention is very much the key activity. Like in all aspects of our service delivery, we're very keen to prevent these incidents rather than respond to them. And we've established some good links around the whole of the county. But for the RNLI, it's particularly relevant at the moment within the City of York, because of the profile of York and the number of people that we do have go in the water. The RNLI have been involved and we've collaborated to deliver training to all the waterside premises in York so that they are able to use throw lines in the event of people entering the water and getting into difficulty. And so the RNLI will provide the equipment, so they supply those throw lines, and the Fire and Rescue Service crews from York will visit with the RNLI to provide the teaching in the use of that equipment, which obviously gives us a response, but it does start to build in some of the resilience within the business community in the City of York. East Coast beach safety, I mentioned previously that we've had some really traumatic events whereby rockfall has caused the loss of life. So North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service were really proactive in a media campaign going out on national television in order to make people aware of the hazards that might be surrounding them when they visit the beach, and very often not part of our normal understanding of that environment. It always seems a very pleasant, safe environment to go to the beach, but it's really important that we work with other partners as well to make people aware. National campaigns with regards to the National Fire Chiefs Council Drowning Prevention Week. And then the other part that I'll mention there, a specific sort of reference, is the universities within the City of York and the profile of people that then go out and enjoy the nightlife, the bars and the nightclubs of York, and then take footpaths back to university accommodation will obviously be at increased risk sometimes, and if they have been drinking, again, that risk is increased. So we've had really good engagement with the York universities to talk to and present information to the freshers as they join the university. This year, that's a really good example of how the Fire and Rescue Service are adapting that community safety work. So rather than it being probably in-person visits, meeting huge numbers of people, it will be online in this sort of forum that we still look to engage with that community and make sure that we're still doing the prevention work, even while that's more challenging during COVID.
So can I just, just obviously we've had some really sort of sad and tragic deaths, particular. So for example, Megan Roberts a few years ago. How regular is your work with the universities?
It's really predominantly around that Fresher Week at the start of each term. So in the September month ordinarily, where we're just leading into now, is when we would look to go and engage with that group of new starters within the university. And that is predominantly the activity, but also within York, there's the Water Safety Forum, of which the universities form partner members, along with the City of York Council, the York Rescue Boat, the Rivers and Canals Trust. So all interested parties, RNLI, and that really, I think, as we move on to the opportunities and the potential for the future, are areas where we want to have that much more involved dialogue and engagement so that we have more frequent contact with such as the university. But I wouldn't, it's really important as well that we get out into the city centre, get across the towns. And, in this year, we've had a number of really traumatic events around Bolton Abbey, Beckhole, to name two particular areas, Codbeck in the north of the county near Osmotherley, some really significant events, life loss, really serious injury to people because they've been going into the water during the period of COVID, you know, and they've had time away from the workplace, a chance to go enjoy the sun, which has had some tragic consequences.
So I'm just thinking about this because you won't be aware, but I've been very involved with various things in York, particular over the years around all of this. But it strikes me that there is a particular requirement at the moment with fewer people holidaying overseas and actually coming, you know, having domestic staycations and all of the rest of it, that there may be an increased risk around this. And I suppose it's trying to find out what you are doing around that specifically.
So in terms of the specific work that we've done in this period, that has been more limited because the last real on the ground, you know, in contact with people and connection would have been that live nighttime economy around the York bars with regards to the RNLI and the throw reach training to the members of staff there. We followed that up with actual campaigns within the city centre of York. This is pre-March time when obviously we went into lockdown, but that was promoting an understanding of the hazards and risks around the river in York. So that includes things like taking the river water, putting it as simple as putting it into a pint glass and saying to people, you know, is that a very appealing drink to you? That's the sort of environment you would be going into if you're drinking tonight and you start and think you're going to have a swim. You know, that's the condition of the water that is going to be there, right the way through to some much broader education pieces. One of the things that we're actually moving on now with the City of York Council is a dedicated team within the City of York that are looking to do much more resilience work around local communities for flood events. So when we see the River Ouse going to flood that stretches all the way down the south of the county and will come in from the north, it's engaging with those community schools to then really develop that early understanding of the hazards and risks of water. And so we're going to be working with that group as part of our normal schools delivery at the year 5 and 6 level within schools.
Okay, all right. Well, I just, John, I think you want to come in.
Yeah, just to support the question you asked there, Commissioner. There is obviously we use social media an awful lot now to raise awareness, and we've got a media campaign which covers certain subjects. And of course, as we come up to public holidays and we come up to times where there's likely to be an increased response area in these places as people go and enjoy some quality time out in the open air, then that's when we do target our social media activity. Community safety officers have also been out on the riverbanks in some of these social beauty spots such as Golden Abbey and other places. So there's a whole range of things that go on in the background in terms of prevention activity. But Andy has quite rightly identified that some of the COVID restrictions in the early stages did prevent us from getting out there, but we did make full advantage of social media and other opportunities in placement.
Okay, I suppose, I mean, the question is also, you know, is there a clear sort of leadership around this? So obviously there's the Water Safety Forum in York, but who's the lead agency on water safety?
So I see that now moving into the post of the group manager for York and Selby District as having the accountability for that, Commissioner. And so I chair that Water Safety Forum. And in terms of understanding risk, for myself in that district, water is, if not the risk, you know, it is one of the highest priority risks. But I would consider it as being the most significant risk of this time in terms of the loss of life or injury or occurrences that threaten life in that area. And so the next part really, which is in one of the end slides, is about to understand. So at the moment, we categorise water incidents very broadly. And where the opportunity lies is for us to define that as in, is it a fall from height? You know, somebody's gone in from a bridge. Is it a slip, trip and fall? Somebody's gone in from the bank side. Has somebody entered the water under the influence of alcohol or other substances, or have they entered the water because of a mental health type related incident? And so once we start to then break that down, that will really allow us to focus as a partnership in the much more detailed prevention work to try and address some of them specific areas. And I feel that we've got all the agencies involved that are required for around the City of York, but of course, we are talking about a very county-wide programme. So that then means me working with the Head of Prevention and Protection in North Yorkshire for that wider county prevention work.
So, I mean, it's interesting because in your slides here, you've got that, you know, different partners have got different priorities, which is always the case. And certainly it's been my experience that it's been quite tricky sometimes to get people to focus on this unless it's actually in the middle of a crisis.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I would agree totally. You know, when we do go into the winter season and we see the Ouse change its profile, for example, around York, or we see widespread flooding, then there is that focus on that particular area of activity. So it is about getting it embedded within our district plans, our station plans. So again, we can measure the changes that we see in behaviour for people, because that's really what we've got to do. Again, in the challenges, it is that public perception of people's understanding of the hazards and risks within those locations. Andrew,
you want to come in?
Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, I think you ask a really pertinent question about leadership, and Andy's talking about that from the tactical leader in York and Selby's perspective. And it's I think what he's doing is he's demonstrating how managers locally now are taking the strategic lead from the strategic leadership team in the service. So we've given accountability and responsibility to those managers for the area that they look after. But then we give freedom and flexibility to them for how they manage the risks and the hazards in that area. So Andy's taken water rescue in York, or the hazard of water in York, as one of his key hazards, and he's now working through that model that we provided of prevention, protection, response and resilience to manage that hazard. So they're preventing in the first instance by speaking to students and other people most likely to fall into water. People who run along the riverbank, for example, are a high risk group of within our communities. They're then protecting by working with partners to provide water safety aids, so that people can help others at the time of crisis. Their response bit is they know their equipment, they know the layout of the river, the access points, the points when people are most likely to enter the water, so they're able to respond very effectively. And what I was really encouraged with recently was they're now moving into the resilience bit, which is helping people to help themselves prior to the arrival of the emergency services. So in York, for example, I'm aware that the local crews have been working with the licensee trade and with the RNLI. The RNLI to provide equipment, and then the crews have been working with licensees to help them know how to use that equipment. So if somebody does fall in the water, they can take immediate action prior to the arrival of the York Rescue Boat or the Fire and Rescue Service. So that I suppose, strategic leadership bit is giving that accountability and responsibility, plus the freedom and flexibility to those local managers like Andy. And then Andy manages and leads his local crews to implement across the prevention, protection, response and resilience field, working in partnership, planning their work. And then what we're moving to is the ability to evaluate the impact of what they do, so we know what works best. So we know if working with students has a really positive effect, or if actually that's having less of an effect and we need to take a different approach. So that's the leadership piece. And just an anecdote that's less than 24 hours old was I was walking last night at Stainforth, north of Settle, and I stopped next to the waterfall there at Stainforth. And as I approached it, there were signs, North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service signs, warning people about the dangers of entering the water. And it's a really dangerous piece of water. They're very fast moving and very strong. And when I was there, there were 4 young people who had clearly been in the water because they were soaking wet. And I stopped, obviously, well from the edge to sit and eat. And and one of them was being put under an awful lot of peer pressure to enter the water. And they hadn't been in previously, they were dry, but they were ready to jump in the water until I spoke to them. And until I was able to share with them the risks that they were going to face and kind of discuss, is the risk of death worth the peer pressure you're being put under? And it stopped them from jumping in. And actually their friends stopped jumping in as well because they stopped the peer pressure. It was quite remarkable. So what I'm encouraged by, I suppose, is seeing the signs that we're putting out and the work that we're doing. And then I know that our community safety officers and our firefighters are having similar conversations with people to the one that I had last night. And that's going to do more to avert the risk that people will drown or be injured in water than pretty much anything else. It's that education piece. So I'll stop talking now, but I just thought it was relevant to share that, because that's just a really important approach that we take at particular times of year when people are most likely to be entering the water. For me last night, it was pure coincidence that I was there.
Thank you. Tom, you want to come in?
Thanks, Julia. So yeah, it's just a question around that. So we've talked a lot about York just now, but as Andrew's pointed out and others, and Andrew, you pointed out, there's been a number of incidents elsewhere, and obviously we had the significant flooding in the north of the county, in Richmondshire, earlier in the year as well, at the end of last year. It just strikes me, for example, while we've got the Mod 4 team in Selby, the York team, as far as our understanding goes, is still Mod 2, which, as we've just discussed, is technically do not enter. I've just a question there then, in terms of the prevention and the response work that we've been looking at on this slide. Do you feel that North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue, you're suggesting, I think, that there's a good understanding of the risk. Do we have a really good grasp of that risk at a station level? And then do you think that actually the Mod 2 level of training that we've discussed here, where it's just about rescuing each other, is actually significant to address some of those risk factors in terms of the severity of the incidents that you've outlined and the risk of death, please?
So I'm happy to respond to that question from York. I can see some of the hands up, but from my perspective in York, yes, I do believe we've got that capability at the moment. There's always the opportunity to improve that, and that's exactly where we're at now. So we haven't had any debrief incidents or incident debrief information. So a review of that incident then feeds back an understanding to say that we haven't had the capability to effect a rescue from within the boat. So the boat moves up and down the Ouse, it's moored on the Ouse, and it is trailer mounted if needed be, as Mark says. What we did find was had an incident in the Foss, which required firefighters to actually enter water effectively from a ladder. And that has then triggered that review. So looking at the incident, it's getting that understanding of whether that Mod 2 capability limited our response. And so what we're in the process of, and actually is just getting close to a point of securing the understanding of the training requirement. But there is an enhanced Mod 2 option, which allows crews then to do what they call a tethered rescue. So they have got lines attached to the crew. They can go into water and make a rescue. So at the moment, yes, I do think we've got the capability, because we've never been able to, or never not been able to, effect a rescue. But as always, the opportunities to improve are being looked at, and I think that we will move to that in a fairly short space of time.
Thank you, Andrew. Did you want to come in?
If you don't mind, Julia, just briefly. You, Julia, are aware that we've got our risk and resource model programme underway at the moment, and there are a number of projects within that. One of those is a capabilities project, and one is a risk profiling project. So Andy talked earlier on that demand for water rescue isn't in the top 10 types of demand that we've got. But demand's only part of risk. It's the likelihood part of risk. The other part of risk is the severity. So whilst water rescues might be low in terms of demand numbers, they are very often high in terms of the severity, because clearly people drown in water. What the risk profiling work is going to do is, better than ever we've done before, identify what the hazards are across North Yorkshire, and water is one of our main hazards, and what the likelihood and severity of that is, so that we can identify where we need to have the most significant ability to respond in those areas, but also to do the prevention, protection, and resilience work. And the capabilities project will give us a catalogue of equipment, training, vehicles, and the clothing, the protective clothing that our firefighters would wear to be able to deal with the hazards in their local area. So what I think will emerge in 12 months is a more detailed, nuanced risk profile with a capabilities list that we can effectively select for providing in the different areas where the risk is highest, so that those firefighters are best able to deal with the hazard in their patch. So you would expect quite a high level of response to be available in those areas where the risk is highest, the likelihood and severity is highest. So I think that work will help us prepare better in terms of knowing where it's most likely to happen and where it's most likely to be most severe, and also to be able to provide capabilities to the local crews to be able to manage the hazards in their area.
Okay, that's helpful, Andrew. So a wider question then is, how do you deal with the sort of the risks that are sort of, you know, the sort of freak flooding type risks? So we've obviously, we saw a really devastating example of that up in Richmondshire just about this time last year, which, you know, was just completely unexpected and you know, wreaked havoc on a lot of people's lives and livelihoods. How do you account for that type of risk?
Again, I think that will come through the risk and resource model, because what we've done historically is largely looked at historical incident data as a predictor of the type of incidents that we'll respond to in future. But this time we are, as well as looking at historical incident data, laying lots of other types of data over the top. So we will be looking at the impact of climate change. We'll be looking at the likely increase in that type of an incident, identifying where it's most likely to happen, so that we can start to equip those local crews in those local areas to be able to deal with those hazards. So I can't predict exactly what would emerge from it, but perhaps you wouldn't be surprised if places like Leyburn and Reeth are identified as having a higher likelihood of having to deal with that type of incident, an increasingly high likelihood as a result of climate change and unpredictability of weather, and that in future we might look at the risk profile of those local areas and provide them with additional equipment, training and protective equipment to be able to manage that.
And how do you keep an eye on then on the sort of ability of partner agencies to keep water courses clear, drains clear, you know, because very often it's that type of stuff that makes those type of situations a lot worse.
You bet. So that's where the model of delivery at the district level comes into its own. So I talk about 7 tools. Our service delivery tools, the activities we undertake with the public, and prevention, protection, response, resilience, but then also the enabling tools, the things that enable them to do that, like partnership and planning. So I'll be giving, or I have given, responsibility and accountability to local managers to identify those partners that they would be working with to make sure things like water courses are clear. So I've experienced from my own career back in Cumbria of working with a local authority to make sure that equipment was provided to keep drains and culverts clear. But then we did training with local communities so they could help themselves, so that they had access to that type of equipment and they knew safely how to use it to stop the flood in the first place. And then we also provided information in advance, an alert system, so we could warn communities when severe weather was predicted, so that they could go out and protect themselves to hopefully prevent the need for us to respond in the first place. And that's what I anticipate local managers will do. They will look at the risk profile in their area, decide who they need to work with, how they need to work with them, how they're going to work with the local community so that they can be more resilient in advance, during, and in the recovery from a flood type situation.
Okay, so I mean, in places like York and Carlisle, you've got the sort of flood alert systems in place, haven't you? Because it's a known risk in those areas. It's when it's more challenging, when it's those sort of freakish types of events, when you haven't got that infrastructure in place, and it's trying to sort of make sure that you've got contingencies in place for that type of response should it be required.
Absolutely, and that's why we'll look at how we need to equip, train, and support those local crews to be able to deal with exactly that type of eventuality. Because last year in places like Reeth and Leyburn, we were extraordinarily lucky to not have suffered loss of life. The crews responded brilliantly. I'm not convinced that they responded with the equipment, training and PPE that we might have been able to provide them, and I hope we will be able to provide them in the future.
I know. I went up there, and if it had just been 12 hours before, an entire campsite would have been taken out. I mean, it would have been catastrophic.
Absolutely, and us working very closely with the Met Office to predict that type of event is very, very important. And also, I think now increasingly we are more aware that what appears to be relatively benign weather in the grand scheme of things can have catastrophic local impacts, and therefore when those weather alerts come in, we're now taking planned action in advance of them to stand crews up to make sure that the crewing levels, the availability of our fire engines is high, and that there's good partnership work across the local resilience forum as led by the county council to help us as a group of partners to prepare for and respond to and recover from that type of incident. Okay,
thank you. Sorry, we've got off track now. We always do this, and we always have a timing issue. Can we go back to Andy and Mark, please?
Yeah, that's on to me, Julia. But what I'd like to just say is that everything that you've just spoken about there really is within this presentation now. So this next slide really is about everything that you've just asked and spoken and been given answers to.
Well, then skip over it then, shall we?
So I don't want to labour. Let me just get my labour this one. Oh. So it's talking about what we have internally, the Water Rescue Group, which is set up with the memorandums of understanding that we have in place with different mountain rescue teams, the local resilience forum that Andrew has just spoken about, where we work with our partner agencies, including the Environment Agency for early warning upstream of flood, the risk of flooding. And Andy spoke very nicely about the flood rescue water safety forum in York. So I don't think we need to take on any more of that. The challenges slide. Now, we've also spoken about that. I'll take a few of these. I'll just put them up on screen. And that one there. I'll pick a few out of here, and if Andy wants to drop in after me. So we've spoken about climate change. It's unseasonal weather now. We don't just get downpours and in the winter or the spring or the autumn. It can happen anytime throughout the year. And like we've seen today, and over the last couple of weeks, we've had Storm Ellen and Storm Francis. And earlier on in the year, we had Dennis and Kiara, or Kiara and Dennis. And we were well prepared for those and worked very well with our partner agencies to warn and inform our communities, to provide good information to them, and to put our resources in the right places at the right times. But it's difficult to predict. I think we can easily say that the weather is going to be more unpredictable as we move forward over the years. Andy might want to talk about mental health. I'll leave that one there for Andrew. We've spoken about the conflicting priorities with partner organisations at different times of the year and what they see as their priority. And I think our local group managers working with our partner agencies is to share that understanding and gain some mutual understanding on what is the most benefit to the communities. And I think that comes down to our local group managers working with our partner organisations and our crews and communities to try and raise the profile of the dangers of water and the unpredictability of it, which we've spoken about, and some of the tragic incidents we've had, but what we can do to help them be safer.
So Mark, you've got 5 minutes to just finish this element off. Sorry to push you, but
No problem.
otherwise we will run out of time. Fantastic, thank you.
Andy, is there anything you want to mention on that one?
No, I think we'll move on, Mark. If there's any questions, I'm sure they'll crop up.
Yeah. Opportunities. Well, we've got the new flood rescue concept of operations that has come out. It will go live in November 21. We're starting to work with that now. And hopefully with the changes that have come about with this change in guidance from DEFRA, we'll get some additional funding to upskill our crews, specifically York possibly, and our Mod 2 teams to lift their capability, enhance their capability even more for the good of themselves and the communities. Results, Andy?
Yeah,
sorry, Mark, sorry, can I just ask, in terms of the note on the last slide about the impact of national pay negotiations, is that likely to have any impact on your ability to implement that uplift of skills?
At this moment in time, Tom, I don't believe it is. We're working very well with our colleagues and our trade union representatives and partners to ensure that we can move this forward. I think what we've got is a common understanding in principle, and there is an acceptance within the area of York specifically that this can be moved forward, and that will hopefully be within the not too distant future.
Thank you.
Andrew, did you want to come in, or have you still got your hand up?
Sorry, I've still just got my hand up from previously.
Okay, all right, fantastic, thank you. So
I must apologise. I can't see people's hands popping up for questions, so I'm rushing through.
Don't worry.
Has anybody got any questions on the future looks? I think the last one. Andy, do you want to pick up that first one there because of the data analysis that we're doing?
Yeah, so in terms of those outcomes and the aims, really, where we want to be is that real clear understanding of the hazards and the risks associated with those hazards right across the county. So as part of that accountability and responsibility is really understanding the community that we serve. But what's really important of that is then the community itself will be engaged in that process. So if people that do live in a local area where they have a number of visitors coming to use a water feature as part of their leisure, they're very often motivated to try and prevent some of that unsafe activity because it can be disruptive to them on a day-to-day basis, just things like parking right the way through to having emergency services respond to a trauma incident. So it's engaging with that community so they feel very much part of that development of the risk, and then feeding that into our action plans to reduce those occurrences. But most importantly, through the head of operational assurance and the profiling of the risk, it's about being able to measure far more accurately and understand how we're changing the causation factors of those incidents so that we can prevent them happening across the county. And, as it does mention specifically York there, that's about ensuring that we maintain that capability that we have at the moment and continually improving it so that it's a time critical response for that stretch of water. I'm not going to elaborate any more unless there's any questions, just mindful of the time.
Okay, so is that the end of your, there's one more slide that we just need to move on, I think.
I think that's it.
That's it.
Okay, all right, fantastic. I've got an extra slide, so I apologise. Okay, so if you want to take John, are you going to pick up the performance element of this, please? John, you're on mute.
Yeah, I'll pick up the performance. Do you want me to share the slides, or is that something else that someone else is doing? I'll share them.
If you can, yes, please.
And John, can I just take, you've got 20 minutes for this.
Okay.
Perfect.
Sorry, that's the wrong one for some reason.
John, I've got them here. I can
Yeah, could you put them up, please? For some reason, that's. Thank you.
And sorry, Mark, I didn't thank Mark and Andy for that presentation. So just remiss of me. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
No problem.
Thank you.
Okay, so just running through the incidents. The period that we're reporting on here is for July. Excuse me. And when we look in July and look at the quarter period also from May to the end of July, we've had less incidents this quarter than we had the previous quarter. So we had 1,664 in a quarter from May to July, and previous year it was 1,900. So a reduction there, and a large proportion of those reductions have come from our attendance at false alarms. And the graph there at the bottom bottom right hand side shows that throughout the 3-year period there are fluctuations and peaks and troughs, but the general trend line is down for false alarms within North Yorkshire, which is a positive. Now, within the most recent quarter, again, there are a number of reasons why we may well have seen reductions. Of course, furlough scheme, people not being within the work environment results in less false alarms. And then also we've had places like York University that aren't being occupied currently, and therefore that again does result in fewer calls there. But overall, good indicator that we're in the right side with the false alarms. And we do locally have interventions whereby we will work with premises occupiers to try and overcome where we've got repeat offenders, if you like. Could you move now on to the next, please, Tom? Thank you. Just breaking down into the special service calls, and it sort of supports a little bit what we've just looked at there with the previous slides. No real trends that stand out compared to previous months in the performance of ourselves at the moment, but a large proportion is still within the other category. And in the other category, we're looking at things like lift rescues, animal rescues, hazmats, and actually water rescues are within there as well. So over the last 3 months, there's no real significant changes or peaks and troughs throughout that period. And indeed, compared to last year, the same period, there's a slight increase in the other category. Obviously, mental health issues are still causing us a problem in terms of our response. They are certainly on an increase now, where we're getting called far more now than we were in 3 years ago to suicide style incidents, unfortunately.
John, this is quite interesting there, because I mean there is actually a significant difference between your quarter May to July 2019 and the quarter just concluded in terms of other. Is that and a very high proportion of 70% in June? Is that COVID related?
There's a whole range of different reasons, and unfortunately, the other category isn't broken down and drilled into any specific areas. But yeah, there may well be influences of COVID within there, but generally speaking, these are down to sort of water-related incidents whereby we've been out and assisting with rescues from water. But that's not flooding related. That's more to do with the warm weather, and so therefore that could be down to the fact that people are holidaying from home, etc. So difficult to sort of really pin it down to COVID, but no doubt there will be influences within that.
I know, but it is a very significant difference, and you've got a very significant difference as well with RTCs, which again, presumably during lockdown there weren't people on the road. So it is quite a different picture.
Yeah, so the RTCs, yes, definitely, and we did that goes right back to March, and they are slowly creeping up month on month now as vehicles back out on the road, and so that is definitely associated with COVID. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Again, the fire situation, when you look across the last 3 months, broadly the same. Back in May, we had 103 incidents there compared to the 87 that we've had in July. And of course, we know that back then we had people burning garden waste, people having bonfires at home. So there was a significant increase back in the month of May. That has slowly tailed back off. Obviously, June and July, there's 10 different ones there, but no real issues in the last month. But certainly May, we did see a spike in the fires, both accidental. In terms of primary and secondary, and that was largely associated with COVID. Amenity centres being closed and people burning things from home, and they were getting out of hand, unfortunately.
So I think what might be helpful, because I do struggle a bit with this performance pack, I have to say, John, because all it's doing is telling me what incidents you've attended, and it's not really telling me anything about how you attended them, any issues you encountered, the challenges, you know what I mean? It's just numbers of incidents. And I just wonder how we get a bit more sort of narrative around this, around the performance of the fire service, rather than the sort of numbers of incidents that you respond to.
Yeah, and as we discussed this morning, unfortunately, we are not in a position where we've recruited anybody yet to deal with our data. It's a real area of frustration, I have to say. And until we really get people in place that we can support us with the provision of data effectively, it becomes very challenging. But you are absolutely right. We need to be able to dig deeper into this, but at the moment we're just unable to do so because of the capacities and the issue with the data provision.
And I think it is fair to say, just coming on that, Julie, they have been working very well with Fiona on this. So we've come some way from where it was. But yes, you're right. There is room for improvement still.
Yeah, absolutely.
Andrew, do you want to just come in? Yeah,
just quickly. This harks back to when I began in North Yorkshire, Julia, and I apologise to the public that I wasn't going to give them the Fire and Rescue Services performance. I was going to tell them what their performance was, because they determine how many incidents we respond to. The work now that is being done by the Head of Assurance will provide a framework and a toolkit for us to evaluate the impact of our activities on the public's performance. So it's not in place yet. This is one of the more medium to long term ambitions that we have as a service, is to be able to provide you and the public with a far more detailed and nuanced overview of how we are performing in affecting the very numbers that you're looking at the moment. And I've pledged to provide that. I will provide that. It takes time and it will be done.
Thanks.
Okay, if we move on to the next slide. So this here paints a fairly bleak picture, I have to say, over the work that we've done in terms of community safety and business safety over the last month, and that's largely down to the impact of COVID. So naturally, over the period, people have not been, people have been shielding in their homes. and these are the vulnerable people that where we would normally go in and deal with community safety activities. And because of the in the early days, the PPE requirements and the risk assessments that we needed in place, it's restricted our progress in that area. Nonetheless, there has been a huge amount of work done in the background aside from that, and so these vulnerable people have been dealt with by other means. So we've done a huge amount of telephone calls, 2,500 in excess of in this period. We've been delivering swabs. We've been delivering food out. Crews have been delivering pharmacy deliveries as well. So there's a whole range of other work that's gone out aside from the traditional home fire risk checks and safe and well visits that we would normally undertake. I would like to think that over the next 2 to 3 months, the balance will swing back the other way now. We've recently received guidance from the National Fire Chiefs Council about the next moves in capabilities to go out and deliver more of the routine work that we were doing previously. But of course, one thing that we've got to consider all the way is any spikes that may come from the COVID side of things, which then can influence things again. I know recently, nationally, the picture is going the wrong way, unfortunately, in terms of the R rate. And in North Yorkshire, we are aware that that is increasing as well. So it's a picture we've got to keep a very close, watchful eye on. But nonetheless, in the background, there is a huge amount of other work going on associated with the community safety and home fire safety. And that also is the same for the business safety.
Okay, so I think you need to find a way of telling the public about this, because I think that this doesn't do you any favours. It looks as if you've been sat on your hands during COVID.
Yes.
I know you haven't. And, you know, you contrast that with the police who've been out there very much on the front line dealing with the communities throughout the pandemic. And I think you need to find a way to articulate that, because this isn't representative of the work that you've done, although I do think that the fire service has taken a different approach than the police to COVID for different reasons, but you need to find a way to articulate that, because this doesn't look good, I have to say.
Yeah, absolutely, and it goes back to the the data side of things. So I approve, agree with what you're saying there. Yeah.
Okay, Andrew, did you want to come in on that?
I think John's articulated just now verbally the work that's been done in the Fire and Rescue Service to deal with COVID and the approach that we've taken. It has been a different approach to the police, because obviously the work that we do is different. We have continued, of course, to respond to every incident that we get called to, as we always would. We've adapted the way that we've done the other work around prevention and protection. The danger in the Fire and Rescue Service is that if we lose a station's personnel, or we lose all of the personnel on a shift to having to self-isolate, or indeed to COVID, then it really starts to impact our ability to respond. So what we've done is, I suppose, we've protected that ability by limiting the direct contact that we've had with members of the public. One, so we don't transmit it to members of the public, but also importantly that we don't receive it from members of the public. I agree that we could better articulate the different approach that we've taken, and that has been a different approach as opposed to a withdrawal of any kind of approach. And we'll have a discussion in our strategic leadership team tomorrow as to how we best might articulate that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly I know there are wider questions outside of North Yorkshire being asked around the fire and rescue's response around COVID. So I think you might need to do that work for other reasons as well. But I do think that story needs to be told, and I'm not sure that this is doing that.
Okay, received.
Thank you. Okay, John, do you want to?
So moving on to the appliance availability. This slide here shows where we are in terms of our fire cover model Last year, May to July, we were in the critical area. This year, we've not been in that position. And again, this is related still to the COVID-19 activity. If we move on to the next slide, it demonstrates a little bit more about where we are. So our overall availability levels in this quarter were 89%. Last year, they were 82%. And I just must point out as well, last year we had the full use of the operational staffing reserve. This year we've got limited use of it. It's now creeping, we're becoming more, putting the measures back in so that we're using the operational staff reserve more so. But in the early stages, certainly in May, we were fairly restrictive. And again, that was down to prevention measures within the COVID environment. The on-call staff and working from home is something that we're very much still monitoring. Our on-call availability levels have slipped back over compared to what they were back in May, but they're still healthy compared to what they were 12 months ago. And so whilst we did have people within the on-call who were furloughed from their primary employment, they're now back to work, a lot of them. But we do have people who previously weren't working from home and now are and may continue to do so. That's been an advantage, if you like, to the service. So a range of different variables in there which we need to consider. We're keeping an eye on them, but at the moment, availability levels are higher than they were a year ago, which is positive.
Andrew, did you want to come in?
No, I think John has covered that as head of service delivery. Fixing the problem of on-call availability remains really our highest priority as a service, and we have a project underway which is going to look at a brand new way to pay, train, recruit, contract and support on-call firefighters and their employers in their communities to better make people able to be on-call firefighters, to remove the barriers that prevent people from doing it at the moment, and to reward people better. Again, from my perspective as a Chief Fire Officer, as a strategic leader, I'm most focused on the medium and long-term aspects of fixing that problem. John and his group managers and station managers, they deal with the day-to-day management of the system as it exists today.
Right, thank you.
And on to the final slide there, which is our absence levels. Again, a healthy picture compared to same time last year. So the on-call short-term sickness levels, 62 compared to 128 last year. And similarly, long-term for the whole time is down compared to last year. Short-term sickness for on-call down compared to last year. However, the long-term sickness for on-call is up. When I've dug into this one and looked at the reasons why, it was the same last month. We have got a number of people who are either awaiting surgery, and that's not happening because of COVID-19. We've had people who've had injuries, sporting injuries and various different things. The long-term injuries is where we've got people of long-term sickness, long-term problems. So that takes a longer way of dealing with things. So, but generally overall sickness levels compared to a year ago are very good.
Fantastic. Right. And is that, I think that's your last slide. Is that right, John?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Okay. Does anybody have any further questions? No? Okay, fantastic. In which case then, thank you very much, North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service, for your presentations and answering the questions. We will now move on to the North Yorkshire Police element of this presentation. I think we're starting with Annette. Is that right?
Yep, that's right. Tom, are you going to share the slide pack for us?
Yes, let me just find the right.
Okay, well, I'll start. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Annette Anderson, Assistant Chief Constable, responsible for local policing. And today we are going to provide an update on the Precept investment from 2019 and the outcomes for that investment. So I'm just going to start with just a little bit of the background, and then we've got updates from Lindsay Butterfield and then Mark Khan, who will be talking through what difference this has made to the communities in North Yorkshire. So just in terms of the investment itself, the settlement resulted in an average of £23.95 for a Band D property. And the investment focused on results from, in part, the neighbourhood policing survey, which identified that residents felt less safe, felt that crime was getting worse in their area, and were not satisfied with the policing presence. So the investment really was focusing about community presence and engagement, and this included a number of new roles which focused on integrated offender management, a focus on reducing volume, acquisitive crime and crime prevention, bail management, public safety officers and online PCSOs, in addition to a city task force. And also what we've got, which Lindsay will explain, around expedite teams. So this resulted in an uplift of 51 new police officers and 20 new PCSOs. So this was very much reliant on the recruitment programme that took place at that time. Clearly, what we didn't have is 50 police officers and 20 PCSOs that we could move into those new positions straight away. So there was a programme of work to get us in that place. There were some challenges with that in terms of the application and recruitment process, and that did result in a £600,000 underspend, which has been invested elsewhere, which Jenny Newbury is going to give an update on that. However, I'm conscious of the time and really want to get into the detail of actually what difference the new officers and teams and PCSOs has delivered. So I'm going to hand over straight to Lindsay Butterfield, who will talk through the City Task Force and the expedite team.
Okay, so just briefly, Annette. So basically what this presentation is saying is that for the £23.50, 95 pence per year on average that people have had to pay extra, this is what they've got for their money.
This is what they've got, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good afternoon, I'm Lindsay Butterfield. I'm the Area Commander for York and Selby, and I'm going to talk to you today about the expedite teams that are in existence across the force and also the City Task Force that we see in York. So as per the slides then, the expedite teams were introduced in September as a result of the Precept uplift. There are 3 teams in existence, that's 1 per command. So there's 1 covering York and Selby, 1 for Scarborough and Rydale, and 1 for the county command, which covers the rest of the geographic force area. Each team is led by a detective sergeant, and they then have a number of constables that are a mixture of uniformed response constables and detective constables. And apologies for the jargon, PIP 1 and PIP 2 just relate to the level of training those individuals have around investigations. So PIP 2 is an enhanced level of training, which you would typically see from the detectives. The teams are focused and tasked predominantly on targeting those people that are causing the most harm in our communities. So that could be high harm offenders because of severity or frequency of the offences that they commit, and also protecting the most vulnerable victims. The posts within the teams operate on a rotational basis, and that was done deliberately to give individuals the opportunity to develop their proactive and investigative skill set. So while the teams are fully resourced, there is a rotational programme that sits behind that to ensure that everybody has the opportunity to develop their proactive or investigative skills. And the teams do work a set shift pattern, as you would expect, but it's fair to say that they deviate regularly to meet demand, and that's done so generally on an intelligence or an evidence-based process. If we can have the next slide, please, Tom. Thank you. So as you can see there, in terms of outcomes, the team have had a huge impact in terms of arrests, so over 200 arrests since they've been in existence. That's across the force, and the information that I've been supplied with in putting this presentation together confirms they are absolutely targeting those that are the most prolific and demanding within our communities.
So Lindsay, just would that be 200 arrests that wouldn't otherwise have happened?
I can't say that definitively, Commissioner, but in relation to the next point, what I can say is the team have the ability to look at crime patterns or trends across their area. So I think where I've seen some benefits in York that my team would react and deal with incidents in isolation, this team have the luxury of some time to look across the piece and understand the trends and patterns and start to put things together. And I think that's definitely where I've seen an enhanced level of service delivery compared to how we were operating previously. And I think it's fair to say that through that approach, we've absolutely maximised some investigative opportunities and subsequently seen some of those results as well.
Yeah.
And sorry, Lindsay, can I ask, you talk there between the difference between the expedite team and your normal response model. Are you finding that there is an opportunity for the information that the expedite team might be privy to in terms of the time and capacity that they've got to do that extra research? Is that being shared across to your other teams? Is in a collaborative way? Is that being shared out so that actually the benefit is expanding across the more regular teams that you have under your control?
Yes, absolutely. So the expedite team predominantly work within the intelligence office at York. As you know, I have to say this is from a York perspective. Presentation covers the whole force, but in answering your question from my perspective, the team are based in the intelligence office and they link really closely with the neighbourhood policing teams and the CID. So yeah, absolutely satisfied that they're sharing that knowledge across the relevant departments.
Thank you.
So as I've said in the presentation, that includes a review of some crimes which have already been finalised, which we may subsequently identify as part of a series. That enables them to go back, reopen those investigations, and we've got numerous examples where we've got positive outcomes from that work, which I believe provides the enhanced level of customer service. As we've touched on already, we've got really good relationships with the local partner agencies, including the community safety hubs, to make sure that we are joined up in the way that we are operating. So I think that's internal and external to the organisation. So we've touched on the good relationships with the CID, the neighbourhood policing teams, and we're extending that now to make sure that we are linking across with the key partners too. As I've touched on already, the York team are based within the intelligence office, and that's really important in relation to tackling the ongoing issue around county lines and organised crime group criminal activity. And that means that they have access to the intelligence in fast time, resulting in a number of very quick arrests and disruptions, especially in relation to drug supply within the areas. And as you would expect, the team have proactively applied for and executed a number of warrants in relation to the Misuse of Drugs Act and also the Theft Act, which I think not only helps with the investigation, but also reassures the community in terms of a visible presence and the fact that we are acting on the information that they're providing to us. Thank you, Tom. So as we've said already, in terms of challenges, we're clearly looking to continue our work tackling community-based issues. One of the challenges that we face in some areas of our communities is the lack of confidence that people have to report information to police. So a really good example of where the expedite team are working really well is in the Scarborough and Rydale area in relation to Operation Thunderstorm. So that's a particular area of Scarborough where we know there are community issues and there is a lack of confidence to report, and the expedite team are working really proactively to encourage that in the communities and have already seen some really positive results from that, and they will continue to play an active role as part of that operation.
So Lindsay, just on that, so that sort of takes me into, and I'm sure it will come up in the performance pack later on, the performance of the FCR. And how and the impact that has when it's clear that COVID has had an impact on the FCR. Are people finding new ways to report and engage with the expedite team? How's that working, and how has the issues in the FCR impacted on this?
I think, to be fair, Commissioner, in relation to that particular operation, it's a lack of confidence in reporting into police in general. And so it's the Expedite team have worked really hard to give alternative ways to report. So that might be anonymously through Crime Stoppers, for example. It might be an email into your neighbourhood policing team, or it might actually be just continuing to build that relationship in the communities, to build that trust and confidence so that people do feel able to pick up the phone and tell us what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, the awful thing would be if people do pick up the phone and, it's taken them a while to decide to do so, and then they get, they're stuck on the line for 20 minutes, they're not going to pick up the phone again, you know what I mean? And then you all that work has gone to waste. So it's one bit, affects the other bit, if you see what I mean.
Absolutely, and I will pick that up with Andrea Kell as the Scarborough and Rydale commander. I certainly didn't have any information or evidence to suggest that was the case as part of pulling the information together for the presentation, but absolutely take that point and I'll feed it back to Andrea. One of the ongoing challenges that we continue to face is around exporting forces taking the lead for the criminality that may be operating in North Yorkshire. So this is especially in relation to county lines. I know we've touched on this previously at the public accountability meetings, but quite often North Yorkshire finds itself as what's called an importing force. So the criminals aren't necessarily North Yorkshire criminals that are operating in our towns and villages. And therefore, it's working hand in glove with the exporting forces to make sure that they are taking the lead for the criminals that stem or originate from their areas. We are much better at that than we used to be, but that continues to be a pressure around working with those forces and getting them to take the responsibility and support us where appropriate. So that's a challenge that we continue to work on. Linked to that is the volume of county lines, so that's purely in relation to the model of drug supply and how quickly that can change. So new lines emerge pretty much within a couple of hours once we've taken some disruption activity. That continues to be a challenge in terms of keeping up with that. And again, that's something that we are working really hard on to try and deal with. Linked to county lines again, identification of travel routes, particularly into the county command, because it is such a vast area. And again, that's something that the team, particularly in the county, are working on. And then we are looking to continue to develop the intelligence in relation to cross-border criminality. So that looks at local targets, but also how we can take positive action with them in conjunction with other forces. And again, we've got some really good examples of that, but that is something that, again, we would like to continue to persevere with. Thank you, Tom. We see that there are a number of opportunities that are in existence to be able to overcome those challenges. So, as we've alluded to already, really good working relationship with our partners. That helps in terms of having a really joined up response within our communities. So there are some examples in York, for example, with pre-planned events using our partners from British Transport Police. But we've also got really good links across with our neighbouring forces, and some examples on the slide there. So South Yorkshire Police in relation to drugs and vehicle crime, and West Yorkshire Police based on county lines drug supply and vehicle crime conspiracy. So really satisfied that we've got the relevant links in place from a policing perspective to be able to make those links across with neighbouring forces. And continue to work alongside, sorry Tom, continue to work alongside our colleagues in the area we serve in support of intelligence and evidence gathering and locating perpetrators of criminal activity. As you would expect, that's absolutely something that we continue to pursue. Thank you, Tom. There are a number of opportunities that we want to develop as we move forward. So one of those is how we link across with other force-wide teams in order to tackle crime trends. So as I've said, we're getting better now at looking across the piece, especially within commands, but actually how do we maximise the use of proactive policing assets, including Rural Task Force, for example, to link in and make sure that everybody's absolutely joined up in our response to some of those crime trends. We've also started to look at how we can do more around early intervention and prevention. So in Scarborough, for example, they're working with the domestic abuse teams, looking at what the expedite teams and officers can offer in terms of offenders of domestic abuse, and to enable safeguarding of some of those vulnerable victims. And that's something that, as a result of this process, York and County are now looking at as well. The teams, some of the teams have their own social media accounts, and they're using that really proactively. They're trying to reach out to some sections of the community that they wouldn't necessarily connect with in order to promote the good work that they're doing. There's lots and lots in terms of the results that the teams have achieved, and we feel that we need to be a little bit smarter about how we publicise that. Social media is one element, but there's lots of other work that we need to do to really celebrate the results that the teams have achieved. Again, we've touched on the next point, I think, already in relation to the rotation of staff and staff development, which we see as a real opportunity in relation to Expedite, and particularly when those uniform officers go back to their response bands, they can share their knowledge and impart that on their colleagues. And again, we've seen some real benefits from that in terms of investigation and outcomes when it comes to CPS and charging decisions. We would like to pursue and develop the prevention and intervention strands in terms of cross-border working, so not just within North Yorkshire, but actually how we can extend that into our neighbourhood forces and what that looks like in terms of information sharing. And as you would expect, we would like to continue the disruption, seizures and arrests, but also enhance the safeguarding and partnership working that we've got through more regular information sharing, and that could be internally or externally to our organisation. And we also see an opportunity with vulnerable people and those that are exploited to divert them away from the criminal justice system and make sure that we get the right support to them at the right time to divert them away from criminality. Two key points in terms of what we would really like to achieve in the next 12 months. We would love to build on our initial success, strengthen those existing partnership links and provide the best service that we possibly can to the public. And while doing that, we would also really like to continue in terms of developing the skill set of our officers that are working on the team, affording them the opportunity to take those skills back into their usual places of work and develop their colleagues. And I think, Commissioner, that's it in relation to Expedite. Are you happy for me to move on to the City Task Force?
Yeah, Lindsay, I think you're going to have to pick the pace up a little bit if that's all right as well, because yeah, okay, fantastic, thanks.
No problem whatsoever. So City Task Force is a sergeant, 6 PCs and 3 PCSOs. They're split across 2 bands to give us the maximum coverage. That gives us some enhanced visible presence in the city centre. All of those posts are filled, I think it's important to say. And as we would expect, they are tasked with tackling key issues and working hand in glove with the neighbourhood policing team. The shift pattern's weighted to make sure that we've got that presence in the nighttime economy, and the team will deploy in uniform and plain clothes depending on the operation that they're working on, but it's always with high visibility in the nighttime economy. And all of the team are now Project Servitor trained in relation to some of the deployments that they have in the city, and I know that's been covered at PAM previously, so I don't intend to go into detail about that. Next one, please, Tom. Thank you. So you'll see from the results there, the City Task Force have had a significant number of arrests, including most wanted offenders, which have resulted in some significant custodial sentences, but also a high number of stop and searches. As you would expect, they've got a really good relationship with partners in the city centre and the city centre neighbourhood policing team. And there are some results on that page in relation to some of the particular jobs that they've been involved in. So yeah, really wide ranging in terms of street dealing, supporting drugs den premise, but also tackling hate crime. And that came from a review of an incident on the transport network where the team went out for a media appeal, which led to the suspects being identified, arrested and charged. So real variety in terms of what the team are dealing with, but some really positive results. Thank you, Tom. So the team have a really good relationship with the neighbourhood policing team and the city centre partners. We think there is a challenge around how we start to build the relationship and understanding with the response teams, and that's what Andy Godfrey, the team inspector, is working on at the moment. So he's got some briefing inputs that he's delivering to response. We also see a challenge in terms of shifting from a reactive focus in the nighttime economy to a preventative focus in the nighttime economy. And again, Andy's got some ideas and some quite creative ideas around how we could do that, which he's in the very early stages of discussing with partners. And again, we think there is a challenge around organised crime groups that are operating within the city, and that's a challenge that we are particularly looking to pick up the pace on in relation to the City Task Force.
So, I mean, it's always been a bit of a challenge, hasn't it? Linking in with response teams. It's never easy. So I know IOM, for example, has always had challenges linking in with response. I suppose the question there is more of response teams actually than this team. It is actually how you, because it's very fast moving, lots of people changing shifts, doing this, that and the other, and how you actually get that continuity of relationships in there.
I think it's even more basic than that, Commissioner. I think it's around a real clarity and understanding of the role of the City Task Force and what they can offer response. And that's where we've pitched the initial inputs at, because I think it is a relatively new role, and I think there is still a lack of understanding of exactly what the City Task Force do, and that's the issue that we're working really hard to resolve at the moment.
Okay, all right, okay. It'd be interesting just to sort of take some of the detail offline about that, just to understand it, because it's certainly something that I know that I'll get asked by partners in the city, so it'd be interesting.
Yeah, no problem whatsoever. We think that there are some opportunities to overcome the challenges that I've just outlined. So in relation to the city centre, as we move through the post-COVID response phase into the recovery phase, we know that the city has a number of different ways of working, and it's absolutely key that the task force are engaged in those planning meetings so that they understand the new normality and make sure again that we've got that joined up response across partners and businesses within the city centre. And as we've already touched on, the briefings to the response teams. And so in terms of what we would like to achieve in the next 12 months and beyond, the operations targeting known criminals relate specifically to the organised crime groups and how we start to join some of that up and really target some of those individuals that are using the city centre to commit those offences. The shift in the nighttime economy from reactive to preventative patrols, as well as reassurance. Continue the deployment of Project Servitor. Continue the proactive stop checks and arrests. To patrol the hotspot areas, which would obviously be evidence-based and intelligence-led to prevent and detect crime, and continue close working with the neighbourhood policing teams and partner agencies to build on the success that we've seen so far. And I think, Tom, that's the end, isn't it, of those slides?
Yeah, so that's sorry, so that's just checking I wasn't muted. Thank you, Lindsay. We've got Jenny and we've got Mark and we've got all the performance slides to go. So can I just ask Mark, when you come to your slides, if you can just pick the highlights, because I think we are going to run out of time otherwise.
No problem, Commissioner. Yes, thank you. My name is Mark Kahn. I am the Superintendent Function Lead for the Partnership Hub. Okay, I've got 7 slides, but I'll sort of give you an overview, Commissioner, and then you can maybe ask me some questions. So I was responsible for the lion's share of the uplift, so over 30 officers, police officers and PCSOs, and there are some brand new roles within that. So basically, some of these roles we wouldn't have had unless we had the Precept uplift. So we'll start off with the mental health coordinators, which are on the screen now, and basically the mental health coordinators, we're using them to develop and adapt our model around dealing with mental health. We're looking to collaborate and we're looking to engage with communities and with other services and to educate and challenge. That's what's around the mental health coordinators. What I would say, Commissioner, with the mental health coordinators is that they have been very well received by partner agencies, which is great, but we're still sort of developing the role and understanding exactly where they can best fill the gaps. We have basically restructured around the mental health team. So previously we had one inspector who was the mental health coordinator within NYP. We've restructured the team. So I, as the head of the partnerships and the corporate lead around mental health, I then have an inspector who has a part-time role for managing the team, and we put one of the uplift sergeants in there with the 4 mental health coordinators. So we now have a team looking at mental health issues rather than one inspector as it was before.
Okay, so that is a significant improvement, Mark. I think that, and given that we're seeing the stats going up, that I think must be welcome at this point in time.
Massively welcome. And the other thing, Commissioner, after COVID, the issue that we're concerned about is the increase in mental health, in particular people with new presentations who with psychosis. So I'll move on quickly. We've also used some of that uplift resource to boost some of our existing teams, which is the licensing team, and certainly during COVID, the licensing team, even though the pubs and everything was shut, have been extremely busy dealing with the new legislation that comes in, the new pavement licenses. So we put some extra resource in there. Three PCs in there to assist the licensing team. That's in response to COVID. Initially, what I was hoping to do was to do some more early intervention and prevention around licensing, seeing what opportunities we had, and hopefully when COVID passes and that surge comes to an end, we'll be able to identify ways of getting ahead in, with licensing issues, because a lot of organised crime groups, for example, use licensed premises to launder money and things like that.
So one of the things I often get asked about with licensed premises is in relation to drug taking in licensed premises and the and the links around that. Will this team deal with that type of activity as well?
Yes, that's what I'm wanting, Commissioner, and also I want to take a more robust line with sort of closing premises. So there's opportunity there to sort of get on the front foot with that, but we need a team that's proactive in that. And initially, the licensing team wasn't big enough, but with the opportunity that's been presented with the uplift, we can increase that team so we get that early prevention work. But at the moment, we're dealing with COVID.
Okay, all right, because local communities know which pubs, where the drugs are, don't they? I mean, so it's also working with local communities to get that intelligence as well.
It is, ma'am, and that I think working with local communities is about our neighbourhood teams linking in there, but they need the expertise of the licensing officers to help them through the legislation. Defence lawyers around licensing applications tend to be very competent, is the word I would use. So it requires some really good coordinators, people who really know their work around licensing.
And presumably that's because there are lots of these are big national chains and they can afford to pay.
Yes. So we need to up our game so we can punch above our weight.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll move on to the next. Sorry, that was the licensing. I missed out the school liaison officers. That again is an existing team that we've boosted with some PCSOs, and again, that's to increase our ability to engage with schools. We already had a team of PCs. We've added 4 PCSOs to that. What we're wanting to do around schools is we're wanting to explore that opportunity around ACEs, or that sort of early intervention in those early years. So that's where our PCSOs will come in. Now, with the schools team, people might say, well, schools have been shut, what have they been doing? Well, the schools were open until the end of July because key workers were going in there, and some of our schools team were engaged with that. We also have, our schools team have built up network with social services and things like that. So our schools officers are dealing with individual cases as well. So for me, the schools team, if we're looking at early intervention prevention, they are right at the forefront of that. And that's why I wanted to boost the team with some more PCSOs.
Okay, so I mean, there's in Jenny's area around commission services, there's a whole load of stuff in schools as well. So the Children's Society, those types of partnership and commission services are in there. I suppose one of the things I get a little bit nervous about is whether there's a bit of a sort of disjointed approach to all of this, and also how it links in with the priorities that the Youth Commission has set. Yeah,
and I think you're right in the terms that it is disjointed. It's about also slightly disjointed. I think we need to reach an agreement with our partners about what we're looking at, in terms of early years. Are we looking at ACEs? We don't have to look at ACEs. What we need to do is identify the exact vehicles that we're using around early intervention and prevention, because it's a real opportunity for us there. And again, the schools team is about coordinating that, especially through the project, the place-based policing project that I'm leading on as well. So it's about looking at those early years opportunities, and I think the school team will play a big part in that. But a lot of that will be collaboration.
But you've also got things like Operation Encompass as well, haven't you? And it's sort of joining it all up. So it's a comprehensive and more strategic approach that I would like to see sort of embedded with the Youth Commission work. Yeah.
Okay, Commissioner, I've taken that on board, and that's where we're hoping to go to.
Okay.
I'm just moving on to slide 17. Sorry, Tom.
Does Jenny want to come in there?
I was just going to say, from a reassurance perspective, the Youth Commission are very much across the kind of work that Mark's been talking about, and if Mark and I link in, I'm sure that we can make sure there's no kind of misalignment and no crossover.
Yeah, I'm not worried about misalignment and crossover so much. It's trying to get a really clear strategic focus and set of objectives around what we're going to do. So we know, for example, that there is an issue of drugs in schools. It might not necessarily be your county line type drugs, but other types of drugs. And it's where are our priorities in all of this, and what are we trying to achieve? That then allows us to understand the outcomes that we want to do and to measure some of the impacts of all of this.
Yeah. Okay. I'm moving on to screen 17, slide 17, which is the hate crime and IAG. Well, this is basically a hate crime coordinator. Again, this is a sergeant who came with a Precept uplift and a PC role that I realigned with from within the partnership hub. Now, basically, before this little team was set up, hate crime sat with me as a portfolio. We now have this team looking at hate crime. The purpose of the team is to improve our investigations around hate crime, to identify learning opportunities, identify training opportunities to spread good practice across the organisation. So that's what we've done. So that's another opportunity that's come about with the Precept uplift that we didn't have before. So that's a work in progress as well. The next slide, slide 18, which is a very busy slide. This is the, do apologise. Okay, no one can read. I can't read it from here. I can't even read it on my screen in front of me. But that is the Public Safety Officer update, which I know Tom is fully aware of, and this was part of the Precept uplift. That's the pilot that we're doing in Craven. Do you have any questions about that, Commissioner?
No.
No. The slide's far too busy.
I am in regular discussion about that pilot, so don't. But I mean, for the benefit of the public, that this is the sort of tri-service, so ambulance, fire, and police service that we're piloting. So I think, as the Prime Minister put it, 3 in 1. So, but anyway, that's what it is.
And so we come on to the community engagement and resilience team. This is a group of officers that we are utilising. Again, this is a resource that we didn't have before, who are dedicated to helping with problem solving. So they are problem solving experts who can go into areas and assist area commanders and other departments with problem solving. So to give you a couple of examples, at the moment, from the COVID recovery, a risk was raised around the excessive speeds that our safety camera vans have been picking up during the lockdown, over 120, 130 miles an hour. And so our community engagement resolution team are working with specialist operations to develop a problem-solving program around speeding right across the organisation. So this is Community Speed Watch will come out and things like that using the safety camera vans. So this is a project or an operation that will run from this autumn right through for 12 months. And I know the roads have got back to being almost 100% full as they were before COVID, but if we get another lockdown, then people will use our roads as racetracks again, or that temptation will come. So we're trying to avoid anything that might come over the next 12 months as well. And the other area, the other project that they've worked with is that one of our officers has done some analytical work for the fraud team in terms of identifying vulnerability around elderly people who are being scammed. And that was a pretty detailed piece of analytical work, which has helped the fraud team to look at ways of preventing crime. I know they do a lot of investigation, but it's supporting them in terms of the prevention work that they do. And then moving on to slide 20, which is the online PCSOs. This again is a brand new role which wouldn't have existed without the Precept uplift. The PCSOs, there's been a delay in this commission in terms of recruiting this team. We've had 3 recruitment drives to try and recruit PCSOs into the role. Initially, we only got 1 person that was interested. We needed 6. Then we went into COVID, but now we have 6 interested PCSOs in the role. The training is going to be carried out on the 22nd of September. Myself and the Chief Inspector in the Partnership Hub are working with Superintendent Sue Jenkinson, who is responsible for the cybercrime team, to see how we can link in with the cybercrime team to identify ways that these PCSOs can help with the preventative work on the in the online community.
So Mark, another example there, linking it back to young people again, is that increasingly a lot of drugs are sold via Snapchat and that sort of stuff. Will they look at all of that sort of thing as well? Yeah,
that's why I'm trying to link in with the cybercrime team, because I used to manage the cybercrime team, so I know that the cybercrime team are right at the edge of ways in which drugs are sold on the dark web and things like that. So I feel that some of the tasking that these PCSOs needs to come from the cybercrime team, because it will link into exactly what you're saying.
I think that's quite different. The dark web is quite different to Snapchat. You know what I mean? And it's those very available drugs that are marketed almost like candy, that just are literally sold in volume via platforms like Snapchat, deliberately targeting young people.
Yeah, I understand that, Commissioner. I'm just looking at the big suppliers, and also, yes, the suppliers on Snapchat, Facebook, all those elements there. We will be looking at that and looking to prevent that type of drug dealing by educating young people. And as I say, the reason why I'm sort of wanting to link in with the cybercrime team is that they have an understanding of that, and they already do some preventative work around that type of drug dealing and or fraud, other things that happen on the internet. And that's my slides.
Fantastic, thank you. So, I mean, it's really good to see progress there, Mark, because I mean, for a number of reasons, things hasn't been that easy. So, thank you so much, and I recognise the hard work and the progress that has been made. So, and hopefully that will reassure the public that their money has been spent on actual stuff and improving the service rather than just propping up the finances. So that is really helpful. Thank you. So Jenny, you're going to talk about the additional resources we've put into 3 different areas of work. Is that right? You're on mute, Jenny.
How quickly would you like me to do this?
Well, so I think you're the last speaker to this set of slides. So you've got about 10 minutes.
Okay. Tom, is it okay if I share the slides so I can kind of work through them? Yeah. So. Okay, can you see those?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so in terms of the 3 areas of work, so the whole family approach pilot for vulnerable children and young people affected by domestic abuse, the domestic abuse, reducing reoffending and harm prevention, perpetrator work and system improvements, and programmes to support early intervention and prevention. So there
Jenny,
are 5.
I'm gonna ask you this to do the same. Please steer clear of the jargon. That is just a big slide of jargon.
Full of jargon.
Thank you.
It's really just the titles of the project. So as we get into the actual project, so hopefully there's no jargon in there. But it just covers 5 projects and areas investment of the 700k that came to us in relation to the underspend of the Precept. So I'll move through these. So the first area of work was in relation to young people who are in domestic abuse households and who need support to be able to deal with the impact of that. So there's a gap in service delivery at the moment. So we're looking to utilise the Precept Understand to fill that gap, working with our local authority partners. So what we're looking to do is spend 330k over 3 years to openly commission a new service that fills that gap. So it would be available for children and young people 0 to 16 who aren't currently eligible for the services that are available. It would be a holistic package of support for anybody living in a household where domestic abuse occurs, and it'd be a range of interventions from one-to-one to group to whole family sessions, and it'd be delivered by specially trained children's workers. And we think for the amount of money that we've got available, we can probably look at working with 4 full-time equivalents for that. In terms of specification development and progress, so we have had some delays in relation to COVID. So our procurement schedule suggests that we should have service commencement from Q1 of next financial year. So in reality, what we're looking for the results from this service is we're supporting children and young people to be better equipped to deal with the impact of experiencing domestic abuse within their household, and the service should commence from Q1. Is there any questions in relation to that, or I'll move on to the next project?
So I suppose my main question is what's it seeking to do, Jenny? What do you want to get out of this new service?
I think what we have at the moment is a gap in provision. So at the moment, we've got existing services in relation to counselling or services in relation to supporting the families around young people within households. What we haven't got is direct support for those individuals to be able to cope what's going on and try and minimise the impact on them for the future. So what we should see is from a kind of a self-assessment perspective that young people feel more able to cope with the situation on a day-to-day basis. So we'd be looking to assess that from a self-assessment perspective and from the workers who are working with it in terms of how they're managing and coping. So it would be strategy development to look at that coping resilience.
Okay, so I mean, so obviously being in a household where there's domestic abuse is one of a number of so-called adverse childhood experiences that can affect your life chances in later life. So this is really trying to support them right now, but also to try and prevent problems further on down the line.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. So I'll move on to the next area of work. I won't go through the title again because it kind of misconstrues what we're looking at. So the multi-agency tasking and coordination, again, I'm just going to read the key points on this. Given where we are, Alan Westcott was going to come and join us, but actually given the time frame, I'm just going to share what's in relation to this. So 95k of the Precept uplift has been used to sustain 3 MATAC posts for the period of 2020-21, and to date we've had about 108 people go through that MATAC process.
And this is perpetrators of domestic abuse.
It is, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. And how are you linking in with the funding that's just been announced?
So from we're reviewing the criteria for the funding that's just come out from the Home Office, because obviously there is the opportunity to work in 2 areas of work. One is the Drive programme, which actually we don't have in North Yorkshire, but we do absolutely have services that deliver to the same standards. So we're looking at as to whether Drive is an option for us in North Yorkshire, but then there's also the opportunity to bid for funding for services that aren't Drive related, which obviously does apply to us because we have a domestic abuse adult perpetrator programme and a Respect young people's perpetrator programme as well. So we're looking as to whether there's opportunities for it to expand what we've got currently or to look at additional added value services as well.
Yeah, okay. So I think we're in the latter rather than the former.
Yes.
I don't think Drive is necessarily where we want to go.
No.
Also, I know it's quite expensive as well.
Very much so. And we absolutely get what we think we would get from Drive anyway through our existing services.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So the next one is the Respect Young People's programme, and this is for high-risk young perpetrators. So we do have a current programme that's developed by Respect and delivered by IDAS, which is for young people 10 to 16 demonstrating abusive behaviour towards families, and it's to help recognise behaviour and change that behaviour, with support also offered to parents and guardians to develop parenting skills and enable to challenge that unhealthy behaviour as they see it. At the moment, the challenges that we face is that this is an early intervention service and it's not really supposed to be for those displaying high risk behaviours. We do obviously have an adult perpetrator service, but they don't accept referrals for those under 16, as it just would be inappropriate for us to mix those 2 groups. So at the moment, what we have is an increasing number of young people and families that are unable to access timely support to prevent behaviour escalating. So what we're going to do is utilise the Precept funding of 75k of the underspend to work with Respect to develop a new service for those high risk young perpetrators.
Okay, so this is absolutely where this funding could land, isn't it? Because it's match funding. We've got to match fund it, haven't we?
Yes, that's absolutely right.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. So we've already started this work, but absolutely there's more we could do in relation to this. So what the hope for this work, or the aim, is to train and upskill local youth justice staff and the staff within IDAS who currently deliver the Respect programme, so that what we're looking to do is probably support an additional 50 families of increased risk per annum. So there's a number of areas of work that need to be done in order for us to get to that place. So we're looking at the need and demand and current skills mapping across those 2 agencies. We're looking at programme and toolkit development with Respect, and then we're looking at a training programme to upskill existing staff to be able to deliver services.
So have we, I mean, I know through the national work that I do that there's been, I would say it's anecdotal evidence of this issue getting worse during COVID. Have we seen that here?
We haven't, in terms of increased referrals or increased high risk referrals. We've actually seen a reduction in referrals. Now, I don't anticipate that's due to a reduction in need or demand. I think it's probably more linked to the fact that we're not getting school referrals, which is the main area that we receive referrals from. We are working really closely with our local authority colleagues to make sure that we're not missing anything, and Sarah in my team is doing a lot of work to make sure we kind of stimulate those referrals back up. I anticipate that it will start again in terms of uplifting referral numbers when we go back into school in the next couple of weeks, because August is often quite a downtime for this service.
Okay, well, so I think it might be worth just touching base with other areas to see what they've seen, because there's definite evidence coming out of other areas that this is an issue that's got worse.
Yes, we will, absolutely. So again, we've had a little bit of delay in terms of working on this, but we are scheduled to have people trained to deliver, and this says Q3, it'll actually be Q2 next financial year. So again, in terms of what we're looking for, it's increased capacity and capability within the existing service to support high risk young people and to support better outcomes for families. If there's nothing else on that, I'll move on to the next. So this is programmes to support early intervention and prevention. There's two services that I'm going to talk about here. So Women's Diversion Scheme and the Scarborough Street Angels and Safe Haven. So in terms of the Women's Diversion Scheme, we have an existing service delivered by Humankind. It's been delivered since the back end of 2017-2018 with the aim to reduce severity and frequency of reoffending and to support progress against criminogenic needs. It's a point of arrest service where women are mandated into provision to address needs over 4 sessions. Schemes open to first-time offenders, minor offenders and offenders with mitigating circumstances. Guilt must be admitted, gravity deemed proportionate, and this is suitable diversionary disposal option. So in terms of challenges, we've had a lack of long-term investment in this service. It's been funded through Community Fund and Community Safety Services Fund, and therefore we've been unable to identify true demand, raise awareness and kind of look to expand the service beyond 4 sessions. Despite that, obviously the service has had quite a significant impact to date. So we've had 46 referrals in 2018-19 with an 85% completion rate and 64 referrals in 2019-20 with a 89% success rate. So we've seen the service demand increase over the years. Interventions and sessions are delivered across the criminogenic pathways, and referrals post-service or during service into mental health agencies, counselling and talking therapies dependent on need. So what we're looking to do with the additional Precept money is to extend and expand the service. So we have an existing provider. We'll look to work with that existing provider to expand the service. So it won't just be available on a mandated pre-court diversion element with women at the point of arrest. It'll also be available via a voluntary diversionary route by women in the community, with referrals in the main coming from community safety hubs. So it's that earlier point of intervention. Again, we'll be looking at initial needs assessment to identify underlying causes, and then bespoke support plans to identify goals and address need, with tailored interventions from dedicated key workers.
So how does it work with Union Terrace?
Again, services do overlap, and I think that's the reality, but this is a key worker service, so we would be looking to take referrals in or potentially refer on. Right,
okay, because again, it's because the Women's Centre obviously has the potential for longer term support, doesn't it?
Very much so, and I think, again, we don't want to close any avenues. We want to make sure that it is open for referrals into this key worker service from the Women's Centre, but also that we can look at supporting women to access additional support at the point of exit from this service, or as a kind of an added addition alongside this service. It really does depend on individual needs of the woman in question.
And presumably it will pick up some of the people who used to be supported by Pathways as well?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, Tom, you've got a question.
Yeah, two questions, if I may. One, Jenny, in terms of the success rate that you just mentioned, on the slide there, obviously it talks about successfully completing the sessions. Do we have any evidence as to whether those people actually go on to not offend yet?
Yeah, so at the moment, looking at reoffending is challenging for us. We don't necessarily have the resource ourselves within the Commission and Partnership teams to do that. We're working currently in partnership with the MATAC team, and Sally's working with the team to do a review of last year's caseload to look at reoffending rates. So at the moment, I can't share that with you, although we have done a dip sample that was relatively positive, which is why we're looking at the full cohort now. But again, the anecdotal information that we've got to date would suggest that there is a positive impact in terms of reoffending, but I can't evidence that right now.
That's great, thank you. My second question, probably actually more relevant for Annette potentially, or Mark. But given the expansion here that we're talking about and the kind of wider referral criteria and so on, are just really interested to understand how the messaging is going to be spread out to neighbourhood policing and response teams who are going to be engaging with these women in the first instance and identifying these people, and whether there's going to be any specific work to make sure that referrals from within our own organisation are actually going to increase in line with that, because I know there's been some difficulty with that in the past, please.
I think from our perspective, kind of sharing information with our community safety hub partners and those who kind of attend those multi-agency meetings to refer individual cases through that method is how we're looking at that kind of that voluntary community access route. But you know, we're very much looking to work in partnership with our force colleagues to make sure the message gets out of the availability of this service and referral routes into it as well. So we've not set anything in stone as yet. However, I'd be kind of really interested to hear from Annette and Mark how we think we could best do that together.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and it's vital that the officers, community safety hubs, working with our partnerships, has access to this information, and then also what outcomes we're seeking to achieve. I think that there's more work, Jenny, that we need to do to tie this, so to make sure that what we've currently got in place with the officers, and also just absolutely making sure that we've got the right information at the tips of officers' fingers as well to make good decisions. So if we can take that, and we'll be able to provide a further update about exactly what that looks like in future.
Yeah, just to echo that, ma'am, I think part of the plan for the place-based policing project will be how we link the information, our colleagues, into the information that's available. So as well as this service, there are many services that are out there, but we just seem to miss the opportunities. So I'm going to have someone looking at that specific part, you know, how we get our colleagues' community involvement, community services, things like that, used in sort of problem solving and place-based policing. So we will be linking in with you, Jenny, on that.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Is that okay, Tom?
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful, and potentially maybe we can understand once we know a bit more about the place-based policing project then, and the rest of it, we can get an update on because I know there's issues. There have been a lot of issues, for example, with supporting victims and getting referrals through, not just from the logs, but with people being picked up into supporting victims from neighbourhood policing as well before. So yeah, it'd be great. It'd be great, Mark, if we can get that nailed.
I think
properly.
One of the principles in early intervention and prevention is to sort of suck out the marrow of the information, the intelligence that we already have, which tends to come from people who are already victimised. And I don't think I think we're missing a potential opportunity there. So that's definitely something that we're looking at.
Okay, thanks, Tom. We're just going to have to move this on now, otherwise we're going to run out of time.
Okay. So the last one is our Street Angels and Safe Haven. So I don't propose to go into detail about that. I think most people around the table will know and understand what the service is. So it's been delivered by Kingdom Faith since 2013-14 in terms of our funding, with the aim of kind of working in partnership to change the nighttime economy atmosphere and provide vulnerable people with safe spaces. Safe Haven is the only non-alcoholic venue with paid staff providing help, and Street Angels supports the reduction in alcohol-related crime and ASB by patrolling voluntarily in the Scarborough streets. Challenges have been lack of long-term investment and recruiting, training and retaining volunteers to ensure weekly coverage. We've been supporting funding through the Community Fund and Community Safety Services Fund. In terms of impact, since 2010, which is when the service commenced prior to our funding, so between 2010 and 2018, they've supported almost 14,500 interactions with the public. From October 2019 to March 2020, they've supported almost 2,000 vulnerable people. In terms of, there is a lot of positive messaging out there in relation to the services. Don't propose to review this, but from individuals, from our partner agencies and from North Yorkshire Police as well. So in relation to the support that the Precept will allow, it will mean that we can extend the service for an additional 3 years. The service has obviously been paused due to COVID-19, given the nature of it in terms of the nighttime economy. So it recommenced towards the end of July. what we have got at the moment is a situation where the funding that we had available for the service can now be extended to the end of the calendar year. So this additional funding will take us from January 2021. So it will allow us to run an every Saturday service, a bank holiday service, weekend before Christmas, Boxing Day, New Year's Eve, and then 8 further nights a year in terms of key events in Scarborough. So it will be a really good use of this funding to extend that, and that's it.
Okay, so that's fantastic, Jenny. Thank you. I would just like to also thank the volunteers that get involved in this project, because I've been up there and I haven't been up for a while, but I have been up there for a while, and they're fantastic. It's great. So I just heartfelt thank you to the volunteers as well as the staff for doing that. Okay, we've now got the performance presentation from North Yorkshire Police, which I think Annette is due to give. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right, Commissioner.
Fantastic. So Annette, can we just go through stuff by exception? Yeah. That would be helpful. It falls into two parts, into sort of operational performance, but also staffing as well. So that'd be, if I could leave that with you, that'd be great.
Okay, so gone to exception. So if we just, have you got the slides again, Tom? Thank you very much for this. On slide 3, which was mental health, and it is something that we have been really prepared for at the start of COVID in terms of any changes in relation to the impact of mental health on services. You'll see from that slide that in May that there was an increase, but that has been associated again to better recording in the FCR. So previously, when we record and tag incidents, that is relying on user, so people in the call handling centre, FCR, to put in a tag. We've now got an auto facility, so that automatically tags mental health, which is a benefit, because we know now that our data is more accurate, that we're getting that. However, last month in July, it accounted for 21.44% of all incidents. So we can still see that mental health is having sort of a significant contribution to the incidents that we see, that we get in the FCR. So in relation to the 136, again, really promising in that we didn't have any 136 taken into a place of custody, place of safety, but 4 presented whilst in custody. I just want to go to the next slide, because we mentioned last month about a concern about the number of 136 that were taken, and what appeared to be a reduction in admission rates. We thought that the average was round about 70%. So I asked the Partnership Hub to undertake with the crisis team a review of all the cases. That 70% was inaccurate of the previous year. It was an aspirational figure. The actual average was round about 30%. So we haven't seen a significant decrease in terms of concern. What I have got is that assurance from both partnership team and mental health crisis team that all of the 136s are reviewed and making sure that the appropriate actions were taken at that time. If there are any concerns and any feedback that needs to be taken about learning from that particular decision, then that is fed back as well at the time. So that has now accounted for what we thought was a discrepancy in that admission rate. If there's no questions on that, in terms of incidents, we saw again a slight.
Annette, just one. We have sort of gone backwards again on the whole ambulance thing, haven't we? In that we've got more people being taken still in police vehicles.
Yeah. And again, that's something that we do need to look at. Each one is risk assessed at the time, and then the most appropriate action taken. I've not received information that has been inappropriate at that time, but again, it's something that we will closely monitor, and we'll take that again as an action to see if there are sort of any sort of significant changes as a result of COVID. And availability, but we'll just take that and again give an update to provide that assurance.
Yeah, we need that assurance because that has been an issue in the past.
Okay, we'll pick that up and bring that back next month. So in terms of incidents in July, we are still not pre-COVID data, so of incidents that we expected. So we are still around about 13% lower than July last year, but we are seeing again, it's almost that return to normality, which was expected with the pubs and other venues starting to open, nighttime economy coming back. So although we're seeing the incidents decrease overall by 13%, we know that there's been a significant increase in those antisocial behaviour incidents. Many are related to the COVID-related calls that we're still getting through to the control room. But again, we're monitoring any trends or any concerns and responding appropriately to those with the structures and systems that we've got in place around our COVID response teams. Finally, in terms of exception, because I am conscious of the time, I just want to move to the force control room performance. The update that we provided last month was a concern around a deterioration in the performance overall, both in 999s and 101. We have since reviewed the causes. What we thought was caused the decrease at the time, and we've sent in an action plan to yourself, Commissioner. It was as we had described last month. It was a number of factors that all compounded together, which included the two locations of Harrogate and York. It also was compounded by a significant increase in 999 calls on certain days. So not overall of the whole of July, but there were some days that were a significant cause for concern in terms of numbers that were coming through. There was also fatigue shown in the control room with staff that had worked long periods throughout COVID to maintain our resilience. So they hadn't taken leave to make sure that we could respond to the calls. And all of that resulted in that drop-off in performance. As a result of that, we have built up our resilience further by training more staff. We have now, right up until the end of September, increased the number of call handlers that we've got in the control room. In the last week, we can already see a significant improvement in call handling times, both in 101s and 999s. So we're moving in the right direction. We should still have a fully established team around about January. So again, these we see as being short-term issues as a result of COVID and other factors relating to that. But just again, hopefully to provide you that assurance that we are seeing an improvement now. I think as well. Sorry, go on.
No, go on. Sorry, go on, Annette. Finish off.
Yeah. I just wanted to go back to the point that you made with Lindsay earlier on this area of business has such an important impact on the confidence within our communities, and just to provide you that assurance that we are now seeing the performance improvements that we talked about last month.
Okay, so I mean the interesting thing is the 101 chart as well, where you've got call volumes are still actually for this time of year, are quite a bit down on previous years. Yet we've still got this the average speed of answer going up very steeply. So that tells me that this is actually a really significant issue. That because actually the volumes are lower and we've got a significant decline in performance. So I mean, and we are starting to get, as you would expect, a lot of negative feedback around this. So I think what we need to do is to be able to put a summary of that action plan in the public domain and to be able to really sort of demonstrate that this is being dealt with.
Yeah, absolutely right. We can do that, but again, it's just providing that this is July's figures and understand, sort of the impact this has had. I'd also just like to, sort of look at the average call duration. So that although we had less incidents, it's taken longer to resolve some of the calls. Some of them are because of COVID related. Our staff getting used to giving advice around new regulations and legislation and various others. We've had a massive increase in new staff working in there that are being trained up. So again, this is a number of factors, but we are, sort of responding to very quickly. So we can put that action plan in the public domain and just, and continue to sort of monitor as we have been doing, certainly over the last few weeks, around the improvements.
Okay, and just one final point really is to thank the people in the control rooms, because I know, they really have been working flat out, and so just a huge thank to them for all of the work that they put in over the last few months, because I know it hasn't been easy at all.
Okay. So by exception, that is everything in the pack. Just again recognising there has continued to be a 30% decrease overall in crime as well. Much of that, as we know, is COVID related, and there are restrictions in place. Okay.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Are you going to do the people element of it, Annette, or is someone else going to pick that up?
Yeah, I can do the people bit. So again, by exception, in terms of the recruitment plan and the uplift, we are on track with that, with the 15 or 8 officers predicted by the end of March 2021. And we are on track with that, and it continues to do so despite sort of the COVID restrictions in place. Carrying on with that. The same with PCSOs. We are again sort of meeting our targets around the recruitment. So this is all really, positive news, as we are with police staff. So just moving to, I think we've got the sickness data, which is on slide 6, the final one. Again, we mentioned this several months ago, that our sickness had reduced significantly over this period. We are again benchmarking with some of the forces just to see if we are seeing anything, sort of positive in terms of that the welfare, working from home. We're working with our recovery plan as well to make sure that staff welfare, well-being, resilience and all the other factors throughout this period. But that has been a really positive news around the reduced in sickness rate. So that is the final slide. So again, Commissioner, if there's any questions in relation to people, I'm happy to take.
No, I just remark really on the success around recruiting police officers and PCSOs. I mean, really has been a tremendous effort, and it's really good to see those new faces in force, and in particular to see such diversity in the new cohort. So that is really welcome, and well done to everybody for that considerable effort. It's great to see. Okay. So Tom, have you got any questions? No. And
no, just other than to note the ASB again on those slides. Yeah, it's great that crime is down, but ASB is obviously having a bit of a resurgence at the moment, so just to keep that in the front of our minds.
Yes, I think that's a very good point. Okay, so I think, have we got any public questions now at all or not? No. So in which case then I think that we are done. We are concluded. Unless there's any other business that anybody wants to raise. No. Okay. So my many thanks to everybody for their contribution, and also for all the hard work in the presentations and materials. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.